Chien-chang and Fan-Ting and Chien-Ming and all the friends, Chien-ming of IPAA and our friends who participate this conference. I'll have to correct Chien-chang just a bit. I'm not the founder, the chairperson. IPAA is a very free association, so I am just the convener in Taiwan. Actually, it's three three countries collaboration project, international project with France, especially with CRAL, CRAL, and Taiwan and Canada in UOT. Yeah. So I'm just the convener in Taiwan, but it's a very collective project. And today I will talk about the multiculturality in curatorial practice. I will talk about especially two recent international exhibitions in the museum, of which I'm the actual director. I have to say that it's the first time I comment publicly our own exhibitions. So it's really the first time, and it's embarrassing because as director you cannot say bad things about your own exhibition publicly. Of course, we said a lot of different kinds of views inside or in private, but public it's difficult to say like art critic, all kinds of things of an exhibition. But these two exhibitions are very good exhibitions, so I have only a lot of good things to say. So to start, about this idea of multiculturality, perhaps I think we have to go back to another concept, which is multiculturalism, and it's much more social and political oriented kind of idea. For example, if we cite Charles Taylor, he said number of strands in contemporary politics turn on the need, sometimes the demand for recognition. So that is one of the key words in multiculturalism. We have to recognize the place, representativity of certain ethnic groups or even sexual groups, etc. So it can be argued is one of the driving forces behind the nationalist movement in politics, and the demand comes to the fore in a number of ways in today's politics on behalf of minority of subaltern groups. These are also other two keywords, and we know there are study called subaltern studies, especially in North America. In some forms of feminism, in what today called the politics of multiculturalism. And I think here we are talking about the multiculturality more in its aesthetic and even creative dimension. That's why I try to do some contribution, especially with the concrete examples in the practical way. And perhaps another point of view is much more, we can talk about multiculturality, its individual experience dimension. We can cite Todorov's work, L'homme dépaysé, means a person who is arraché, is a French word, who is, if you say that he get out of his country, it's just very simple, objective way, but in French, arraché means taken away, even a bit by force, out of his root. It have this kind of a connotation, and this book is kind of an intellectual biography. I myself has contributed Chinese translations publication in Taiwan. Actually, it is translated. What has been translated into Chinese in mainland China, but it is prohibited to be published in mainland China. So we have this manuscript of translation, and I help its realization, its publication in Taiwan, because certainly Todorov has talked about his Eastern European past experience and his observation of later regime after the communism. And I think that is one of the reasons why the book could not be published in mainland China. That's it. more than 10 years ago. And he said that à recherche son milieu tout homme commence par souffrir. Everyone who is taken away out of his environment, this person will start by suffering. It's better to live. I just translate very freely of the French. It's very small, certainly more agreeable to live between his peers. But after this out-of-country experience could be fundament of a very profitable experience. That is very daughter-of-like concept. Is that give us the possibility to not confuse the real and the ideal, not confuse the culture and the nature. Of course, I have to recall that Todorov is also one of the founders, the real founders of the CRAL, of which I'm also the dean student. And this out-of-root person or this out-of-country person, if he can how to know how he can success to overtake the resentment, he will just go very quickly, he will discover by curiosity and practice the tolerance. Also, there's some kind of ethic also inside his experience. And his presence in the natives, in quotation mark, in the natives, exercise in this turn a kind of out-of-country effect, because he will trouble their mental habitude. They will trouble by his conduct, and trouble them by his conduct and his judgment. You will favorize astonishment, and that is the astonishment would be the first premier pas, that first step, obligatory first step in all the self-discovery. I think there's a lot of wisdom inside, but most important is that Todorov said, what is intercultural? A person who is multicultural, intercultural is a person who has this very personal experience to live outside of his own country, outside of his own culture, and later he can go back to his own country and to discover in another point of view, a new dimension of his own culture, and is coming back and forth. And in a way, he's someone in between. It could be a very disagreeable situation for him. If you go to read this long debate, this intellectual biography, but also very profitable. It could become a kind of a resources for his person. And later we also I bring another two works, two conceptual work, one by James Clifford, and the other by François Julien, to question our idea of culture in general. I think the idea of culture could be thought in its multiplicity, in a more multiple folds way. Like James Clifford, who define culture not like in habitude as a specific way of life, but culture as a context zone. That means culture in its very formation is already in a kind of a context, in a kind of intercultural, if we can say, if that is not so complicated situation. And so the importance is later book root, the importance of the travel and translation in the formation of culture itself. And Julien go further that the French word we cite here, in culture n'a pas identité, n'a pas d'identité car elle ne cesse de se transformer. He said there's no cultural identity because culture cannot be identified with itself. It's always in transformation. So identity and culture is a paradoxical, in a even oppositional situation. course, that is kind of an oxymoron way. It's kind of a metaphorical, I would say, very figurative way to talk about the problem of cultural identity. Is that the cultural identity doesn't exist because the culture itself always transforms. It's always transformation, constant transformation. And with this, Jialong, with this point of reference, I would like to talk about two international exhibitions at NTMOFA, at National Taiwan Museum of Fine Art in Taichung. But it's not only in Taichung because national, so we are opening a new branch in Taipei very soon, next year. So the first one is synchronic constellation, has been evoked yesterday by one of our colleagues. And pay attention not only to the title, but also to the subtitle. The subtitle is the Mulan Poetry Society. The Mulan is not only the name of the society, but also the name of the design, a zine, the journal of this society. But the Chinese and already the Chinese and the original, the Mulan, is in a kind of a tricky situation. So I will talk about it later. The Mulan Poetry Society and its time, cross-boundary exhibition. So the exhibition will talk about this literary group, this first and only avant-garde poetry group before the Second World War, and its time. So its time is not only the time in Taiwan, but also in Japan, also in the world, also in all this situation. The exhibition tried to talk about that, try to present the development of art and culture since the 30s. And it emphasizes it's a cross-boundary in the arts. So we'll talk about it later. It's not only painting, not only visual art, but also many different things like literature, like theater, and other music and others. And the show is in this summer. And the other one is 2019 Asian Art Biennial, The Strangers from Beyond the Mountain and the Sea. We have to emphasize on the word. First, it's strangers, not stranger. Because the curator, the two curators, they want to put the word stranger, but I, as commissioner, my role is not as director, it's not a curator, but not the curator, but commissioner. I commission the exhibition. I invite the curators and other teams to work together. I tell them I prefer, as their idea says, strangers with multiple, idea plural. Yes. So joy, Bansong, Shen's, multiple others, strangers. Also, that's not only beyond the mountain and the sea, Sanshui, Sanhai. It's a kind of metaphor of Chinese landscape painting. Not only from the mountain and the sea, it's easy, but from beyond the mountain and the sea. So what's the beyond the mountain and the sea? It's kind of a very question point in the strange point itself in the title of the exhibition. So that is actual one. So if you don't have the chance to see the synchronic constellation, I invite all of you to NTMOFA, to Taichung, to see the exhibition by yourself. It's a very good exhibition, and it's open until the middle of the February next year. And before the comment about the two exhibitions, to say that I will analyze these two exhibitions by two levels. Actually, the study of exhibitions is something very difficult, because exhibition by itself is not something easy to, how to say in French, to saisir, something easy to hold. It's not exactly an object. It's not exactly an event. Because if, say, it's an event, it's time-based. But exhibition not only time-based, because you have a lot of objects, a lot of things stable inside. But also a lot of events happen in that event. And a lot of kind of point of view possible, and each person has its own point of view. So it's very complicated situation. But we always try to try to hold the things that is not not holdable. So I think could be analyzed by two levels. First one is so-called curatorial level. The other one we can analyze it's the exhibit level, that is more by the exposed artists and by the exposed works. And the first level is the level which is not so easy to be recognized, not so easy to be perceived by the people who don't work really in the museum world. I mean, in the art world it's okay, but even in the art world, for example, when I teach students, they cannot really they cannot really understand there's a curatorial level. So I will spend some time to talk about that. There's another French quotation here. This is from a book, cover book, not so easy to says it here, but it's the book. It's a end of that century 80s book, and talk about the experience of the 80s exhibition. And in that book, the authors, the two authors question, put one question. Est-ce que l'exposition est devenue plus importante que l'œuvre d'art? Is the exhibition itself becomes more important than works of art? If we don't search no more originality in the art, but in the exhibition and its author. It's kind of a shifting of gravity, shifting of attention, shifting of, in academic way, our object of analysis. Briefly, what's the function of the exhibition today? What's the role played by those who take part in the art of exhibition? So already in the naming, exhibition itself could be an art, could be a result of art making, and its author, curators, commissaire, could be a kind of artist-like person. That is, if we have to recognize these, we have to understand this so-called curatorial level. Yeah. And the curatorial level includes many things, not only the naming of the exhibition, not only the selection of the works, not only the scenography, the many different other things all together. So let's come back to the synchronic constellation. The Mulan Poetry Society is time back, I would call it background story. The Mulan in Chinese is transformed into 风车诗社, 风车. But in French, the Moulin doesn't represent necessarily 风车. The Moulin à vent could be Moulin à l'eau, could be Moulin à café. If we look at the picture of Duchamp, it's Moulin à poire. So the Moulin itself doesn't go directly to 风车. 风车 is in Chinese Moulin à vent. But they do it like that. So you can understand there's kind of attraction. They entitle their poetry journal in a French word, but they don't really understand that there's this very subtle difference, that is problem of translation. And this picture is the only original journal, poetry journal left now. Yesterday's speakers had conserved in the Museum of Taiwan Literature, National Museum of Taiwan Literature. And we have this very fragile object, so we have exposed the duplicates. So for that, now we go to the statements by the curators. I have to say also that I have to insist that there are three curators. They work together, not only Alex Huang, who has one of course, the most important curators, but the other also has their contributions. So in the southern land of Taiwan 90 years ago, a rare flower bloomed. Its name was the Mulan Poetry Society. Established in 1933, this poetry society is jointly founded by Japanese and Taiwanese poets. I think that's a very important point. It's a group. It's like in the beginning of that century, a lot of, like many other artist group, but it's an international group in the very start. There are 3 Taiwanese and 3 other Japanese together, young poets. Then you have name here, so you have by the name we recognize very clearly. They are Japanese like Kishi, Reiko, Toda, Fusco, etc. But there are actually 6. In keeping with the new spirit, intellectualism, and lyricism of the time, modernist poetry was the focus of creativity, publication, literary ideology. And actually, the Mulan, the journal has been published only in 4 numbers, and the society exists only for around 1 year, a bit more than 1 year. So it's very short time existence. And at the end of the 70s, the Mulan Poetry Society re-emerged on the horizon of Taiwanese literary art, literary history. And it becomes the subject of the 2015 film, The Mulan. No, it's not a stage, it's kind of a background. And they, on the one hand, the curators want to position this the Mulan and the Mulan Poetry Society in the global modernist trends and movements. On the other hand, they want to talk about their life experience, cultural inspiration, and historical incidents encountered by the group of these Taiwanese and Japanese poets. So, also already in this very brief introduction, we have several things. We have the film 2015. Its English name is foreign language title, also Le Mulan, but its Chinese title is other. It's the worker, the promeneur, the dimanche. It's the worker in the Sunday. So it's actually is from a passage by one of the poets. He said that we don't do nothing every day. Like every day is Sunday. We are like someone who has nothing to do. Like every day is the Sunday, and they stroll in the city or the very flat way. So this is why the Chinese title is 日照日式散步者. Sunday worker in the style of Sunday worker. So that is the book cover. They have later published 2 volumes and 1 DVD for the film, after the film. And later it becomes exhibition. And now they are preparing, the group is prepared. I always say they, because not only one person's work. Now they are preparing the big catalog of the show. So in the curator statement, we can see their intention. Like artists will have to talk about their intention. So this is one that hopes to further deepen and extend the way roused by modernist literature and art culture. So not only represent clearly, not only tell us what happened, but try to further deepen and extend the way roused by modernist literature and art culture in the Western world and the East Asian countries. And to rethink ways in which Taiwanese cultural workers in the colony formed by relationship with Japan, China, Korea, Europe, and America. So not only Taiwan, Japan, Europe, not only Taipei, Tokyo, Paris, but a larger scope, including China, Korea, and America. At the same time, contemplate key historical events and their effect. So not only art, what happened in the art world, but also historical events. Actually, the film itself could be divided into three parts. One part concentrates on the experience of this poet in Tokyo at that time. So a lot of citations from the journal, personal journal, but also the war period. So how all the war machine, like in Nazi or in Japanese wartime government, transform the whole literature and art society into a kind of war propaganda device, war propaganda tool. And later they also come to the after-war period, how this group of poets are executed or harassed in the White Terror period in Taiwan. So essentially three parts of it. So a lot of historical background, a lot of historical events, not only art events, come into the film in three parts. Actually, everybody says it's very difficult to understand. It's not chronological. It's like a synchronization of different things, collage of different things. But actually, if you go through the film, you see very clearly three major parts, chronologically arranged. So they will talk about pre-war and wartime literature, art, theater, photography, music, film, and other artistic paradigms. So a lot of different kinds of art form go into the show. So I have already talked about the title of the show, and of course everyone will talk about the transplantation. I use the word very willingly. Transplantation of the film. There's one thing very direct. The director Alex Huang, who is the filmmaker of this the Mulan film, quote, you can see here the arrivée Tang, arrival of the train, the Berlin Symphony of City, but also his own film in the exhibition. Yeah. So there are several ways to talk about the relationship between exhibition and the film. One is how the film itself is represented in the exhibition. Yeah. By one way is by this fragmented projection. 碎片投影 is the other part. You can see here, if you are very connoisseur in film, you see this is from Levenstein, Triumph of the Wheel, the very beginning. Hitler, like God, appeared from in the clouds, of course in the airplane, but so see the world by your body. And other citation fragments in the exhibition. But of course, another way to talk about that, we'll talk about it later, is the relationship between the film and the show is not so simple, because we see a lot of objects quoted, shoot in the film, presented in the exhibition. So it's another way to present the object. One is to shoot them, to put it to kind of very tight time sequence in the film. The other way is to display them in the space. But also other things, because the show, I think that's quite personal interpretation, but I think that corresponds very well to the intention of Alex Huang, is that the experience he tried to shape in the show is a kind of a three-dimensional film experience. People go into the room and experience by himself, by his own montage, by his own itinerary, the different kinds of combined or other things. And one of the evidences is that the sounds that should be accompanied by the experience of the viewer. Actually, he put by QR code 10 passage of sounds, and they are not at all explaining voices. In the museum, we often practice this. We give QR code to viewers, and they can by their cell phone hear explanation. So you don't have a voice guide. You don't have to take a voice guide. You can just hear by the cell phone explanation of each word or the important highlighted words. That is the current practice today in the museum world. But in Alex Huang's practice, it does not put any explanation there. It just give you some noise. It's literally asks some noise artist to produce them and to accompany the experience of viewing. So we can see very clearly what in his conception, the viewing experience should be a bit like the viewing experience in the cinema house, in the cinema projection room, but in a different way. And the multiculturality in another dimension to talk about the multiculturality is in the curatorial level. It's talk about the cultural migration and cultural form translation. My idea is that we talk about culture because of multiculturalism. We have a tendency to think about the culture carried by some group, minority, ethnic group, sexual group, subaltern group, etc. But culture could be many different things. Culture could be a form. In the so-called cross-boundary situation, we talk perhaps often about the multi-medium, the cross-medium situation in the exhibition. But I think the painting, the cinema, the music, the theater themselves are also cultural form, in the sense that, in the measure that all these are also shaped by its cultural environment. And we have a very good example here, concrete example here. That is the contribution by Professor Iyawa Chien-chang, one of the curators. He's from Japan. He's a very experienced senior professor, one of the, I think, the most important specialist of surrealism in Japan. And he has contributed a lot in the exhibition. Not only written, he has not only written an important essay in the catalog, already printed in the brochure, but bring us a very detailed view how the history, how the surrealism developed historically in Japan. And two key persons to be present here. One is Nishiwaki Junzaburo, Xixie Sun Sanran. The other one is Takiguchi Shizo, Longkou Xiuzao. And Junzaburo is the professor of Shizo. And Nishiwaki is the person who has firstly written a serious essay about surrealism, poetry criticism. But Professor Onion tells us that very important information that the book published in 1929 is originally titled as supernatural poetry criticism. So that means for him, but later it's transformed by the editor, because the editor thinks surrealism poetry criticism will have a better selling. So he transformed. He asked the Nishigawa to transform the title. But actually, by that history, by that research, we know that in Nishigawa Jinzaburo's mind, that he doesn't think the poetry he discussed are the actual surrealist poetry. They are more like Baudelarian, supernatural way of thinking about poetry. That is one thing. The other thing is the role of Shuzo. Shuzo is the student of Jinzaburo, And he has written a thesis under his direction about surrealism, and he's the one who has translated the work of Breton. Surrealism is painting. The year after the publication in France, in 1930. And he's very in real exchange, in real relationship with the surrealist group in Europe, especially in France. And he's the one who has, for example, he has two concrete examples to talk about that. He has written very famous 7 poems, and that 7 was included in a book called L'échange surréaliste, surrealist exchange. It's a book illustrated already at that time, illustrated by the painter's work. So it's already a cross-medium or cross-boundary work. And also he's the one who has contributed by his personal works a lot to the 1937 overseas surrealist exhibition in Japan. Actually, in 1937, the surrealist painting went to Japan and exhibited in Tokyo. So Shuzo, in the view of Cuneo, is the real person who really understands well the surrealism, much better than his famous professor, Xixie Shunchang. But people knows, of course, better the professor than the student, and Nishikawa exercised much greater influence at that time. So that's a very important point to know that in Japan, the surrealists are and accompany thinking and art movement introduced not in a very exact way. So I think we should talk about that. There are cultural forms in exhibitions, and perhaps also talk about the montage in the cinema, and in this opposition to the juxtaposition in the exhibition. And I have talked about the sound effect and the document reading, because the document in the film are presented in 2 ways. They are shoot the cover, they show the cover, and they read. In the film, you can read by the voice of some part of the document, like the poetry or the personal journal. But in the exhibition, we encounter that in another way. Here, it can be viewed in the vitrine, but also like this, be printed on the wall, and we can read them in our own pace. We read them. The poetry could really be saisi, could be understood very quickly. We can read them annotated in our own pace. It's a very different way to approach our cultural forms or cultural object. So I've talked about that problem discussed that problem with Alex Huang himself. For him, actually, it's quite different medium, quite different situation to shoot a film, to make a film, and then to make an exhibition. But it's not only a space, the difference between space medium and time medium. The film is more time-based medium, and exhibition is more a space-based medium, because in the exhibition, you have also the time-based object like film. So it's very complicated situation. And also in this exhibition, like the other speaker said, it's one thing very important. It's conceived a bit like a labyrinth, and the curators doesn't give very clear direction guide to the viewers. You can start, they advise you can start everywhere in the exhibition and go everywhere you want. Every time you find a different constellation by itself. But that, of course, creates a kind of confusion for the habitual viewers. They want much more clear guide and much more clear signals to them and advice, etc. And there are also if you have time, there's also conflict between the museum workers and the curators about that point. But for him, there's another thing that he said, that he told me that as a movie maker, he has to control the image, his time sequence very tightly. Where it appears, how many seconds it should last, etc. Its relationship with time is different. While in the exhibition, for example, here, he used the work of a new media creator group, their work, and the image appear randomly. You have to practice kind of a loose control, kind of work on himself. It's quite different. And if we come to the level of exhibited artists and workers, we can, for example, go very quick to the Chien-chang Portable is very important. Chinese painter died in the 28th February incident, and here we present his work like this. It's also example of how the works are represented, a bit like in the salon style. But here, there are two works I should talk about it very quickly, because Chien-chang himself is very, a bit like Todorov. Unknown Taipei is a person who is born in Taiwan, went to Japan to be educated, and work in China, in Shanghai, and later come back to Taiwan and be executed by the nationalist government coming from China. That's very briefly his life. And so he has in contact with many different cultures, especially in Shanghai. For example, in this picture, which is also a forbidden picture to be exhibited since long time, and now we have access just since very few years. Why? Because that is the family portrait he has painted of his family in Shanghai, and on the table, this book actually is an essay on the proletarian art movement. So that is communist thinking and etc. and could never be shown in the, of course, the White Terror and after martial law period in Taiwan. And the other one is here. It's very strange picture we discovered, kind of discovery in this show that Chien-chang has painted a nude, but with a green mask. It's not very clear on the picture, but it's a nude. It's by Chien-chang, it's a nude with green mask. And why Chien-chang painted this picture is a kind of mystery. Perhaps Chien-chang is not as we think a Van Gogh-like artist with color, with a very personal brush strokes, but also with some surrealist thinking in his artist's work. And the other person is Cocteau, the role of Cocteau in this show, because Cocteau is kind of a person who is considered as a key person who brings French new ways of thinking art, working art to Japan. Here you see he has several passages to Japan. Here you see his picture, photo together with Fujita and Sumo. And the film and exhibition cite a lot of Cocteau. But actually, Cocteau is not exactly a surrealist artist. He's a very multifaceted artist, but not exactly surrealist. The pure things in the detail here. So this is one of the trailer.
Un poème d'opéra de Jean Bocuse dit par l'auteur, les voleurs d'enfants.
If you understand French, it is poem opera, it's opera poetry, poems, and recité. It's read by the author, it's by John Cocteau, it's by a disc record of the period. And the title is Voleur d'enfant, is the stoler of infant. So it's a lot about the infant. By citing this passage, this sound passage, I think that is not only very innocent that we have preserved John Cocteau's voice, so we put it on the film. We talk about children, talk about infants. It's kind of a self-identification as a kind of descendant of John Cocteau. Very, very hidden metaphor in the film. Let's continue.
Et soudain sortit d'un piège de boue et d'ortie, la bohémienne, pour le compte du cirque, vend un fils de tombe. Tandis que la mère à peine folle, debout sur l'allée, l'enfant, en haut d'une échelle, au cirque, apprenait à voler.
bit secret reference to Cocteau. If you know, well, Cocteau has also, himself is also a filmmaker. And for example, in The Song the Poet, in The Blood of Poet, he has worked a lot with this reverse effect. That we can reverse the film sequence. That is one of the effects that is utilized here, kind of homage to Cocteau's technique. So, sorry, I have to stop here for this interesting footage. To go to another trailer, it's another version of trailer, and that is the professor, the Nishikawa.
CRAL のパリの屋根の下が上演されてから。
Actually speaking, you have many layers here. You have the film by CRAL, sur le toit de Paris, on the roof of Paris. You have the commentary in Japanese, but actually it's cited from the journal of Taiwanese poet who has been in Japan and talk about the what happened in Tokyo.
銀座の通りに取り打ち同士が増えたとは驚くべきで、ほとんど歩いている青年の 60% がカスケットなのである。またこれらカスケット連はパリの屋根の下の歌を口笛を吹いて歩く。驚かぬ人はいない。私の友人は平然とそれは夏のせいだよと言った。三越の地下室にたむろするアバンギャルドたち、その光栄ある貧乏とうまくいく物価の安さに。
So many things happen here. The way, the style, lifestyle of avant-garde artists, the style of talking is nothing. We are just the fault of summer, not the mode, but fault of summer. Or this manner also is something you can see how the things migrate from one country, one continent to the other, and received by other people. And also we can come to a very important picture in the show. It's by Honga Haru. It's a picture, painted very early picture in 1929, because the author died very, very young. And in this picture, we consider it perhaps the first seriously surrealist picture. So the painting in Japan, in the interpretation of Cuneo, actually it is not really a surrealist spirit picture, because surrealism, as we know, is an art movement after the First World War, and there's a very deep deception of Western civilization. And but in the picture, you see a kind of desire to go to the modernity in the diving young girl, in the submarine, all these industrial images, flying boat, etc. So for him, Japan has received a lot of European new ideas, new trends, but use it in the Japanese way. Because Japan, for him, Japan has joined the First World War, but it's not a victim of the war. Japan actually is, get a lot of profits from the war. We know that from China and from a lot other places like from Korea. So the spirit, the intention of this work is not to like surrealist painting to criticize the civilization in a very general way. About that, talking about the desire, about the subconscious, etc. but to celebrate the coming of modernity. And this is considered as the first serious surrealist painting in Japan. So for him, the Japanese did not understand or receive very well, but also perhaps they received well, but they use it in another way, the surrealist, so-called surrealist trend. That is one big, very important example. And by his effort, this picture could be moved from Tokyo's modern art museum to Taiwan. So now I will come to, because time, very limited time, we'll come to the strangers from beyond the mountain and the sea. It's not only from, I will insist again, it's not only from mountain and the sea, but from beyond the mountain and the sea. That is the entrance, the lobby, a lot of rocks, you see, from Wang Shixun is a Chinese artist, and he collects human form rocks everywhere, even reproduce them if you cannot transport them. And actually, it's a picture. It's a very representative of the show because it's the show I've ever seen in my life with most various kind of rocks. There are a lot of rocks in the exhibition. And perhaps we should go back to, it's a biennial, so it's Asian art biennial, go back to biennial in the context of globalization. Actually, when the Western, especially the curators from Europe and from America, from Western civilization, they play the role of discoverer and explorer, but still who is entitled to that, and still the recognition, the center is still in, at least in the 20 years ago in Europe, in North America. So the power relationship is still there, even some Asian or other continent artists are introduced into European and Western American exhibition importance thing. And you have to know also, so there are always question about the existence, the legitimacy of biennial. And one of the reasons why there are a lot of new Asian art biennial or Asian biennial recently in this 20 years, is one of these reasons. But the other reasons are the motivation by the tourism. Biennial is alternative to the market. There are three kinds. Generally, we divide into three kinds of art: contemporary art, museum art, good for the museum, good for the biennial, and good for the market. Of course, they are so clear-cut, separated, but actually they are different. And biennial is also considered as kind of resist to the hegemony and create kind of biennial art. Biennial considered as kind of laboratory and utopic space. It's very general to talk about context, actual context of biennial. But we have to put back our curator's statement into that context. They cite a Japanese thinker, a folklorist called Orikuchi Shinobu, 泽口信夫, is either Mari Bito. Mari means rare and Bito means human, so rare person. Actually, they transform the idea into others, many others. So it could be spirit, gods, but also shamans, foreign merchants, immigrants, minorities, colonists, smugglers, partisans, spies, traitors, strangers. It's the medium through which another world may be communicated. So they want to discuss the outlines of ourselves, the borders of our society, even the boundaries of our spaces. So that's why the idea of beyond, very, very important in the title. And for the mountain and sea, this idea of Zomia is part of the Asian continent, and Sulu Sea is in between the Philippines and Malaysia. This part, they cite this two parts in the world to form a first geographical configuration. And for them, this Zomia and Sulu Sea could be elevated regions stretching from the highlands of central Vietnam to northeastern India at 300 meters or more above sea level. And the through sea is a marginal sea between the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea. And from this, they create kind of a conceptual axis in opposition with the other axis, that is the diagram stretched from the clouds in the Earth's atmosphere to minerals, Earth's surface, but also had in mind the digital cloud, because today we talk about the cloud computing, cloud, in a metaphor way, about us, communication about us, not embodied in just in one cell phone computer. The roles of non-human element and non-human scales of time. So that come to this conceptual diagram with Zomia and through C to form an X, and clouds and mineral to form the other X, and with all the complication, and they think the center should not be the subject but the void. So I think here interesting thing is that they bring into consideration the other dimension of the culture. It is very opposition with nature. We have been talking about multicultural, we have a bit forget about them. So we use the human, non-human relationship to decenter the human, and culture in the sense of artificial and human-made, not only a specific way of life. So I give you the very quick view of the trailer of the show. Very briefly talk about the expedited level. First one I would cite is to discuss is Liu Chuang's artist, young Chinese artist, around 40, and it's very special work. I think everyone who goes to the show will be very attracted by this 3-channel video with very good sound environment. Actually talk about the bitcoins and collection of minority music, but the idea behind the construction of modern state goes through the information infrastructure, and this enable to today the possibility of making of the bitcoins and the collecting of the minorities music, especially in Zomia. And there's a meeting point in Zomia is that in the film, in a way, in the middle of the film, that goes to the citation of two films. One is the Third Contact, Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg, and the other one is the Solar Race by Tarkovsky. And actually, there are images of alien in the film, and this image of alien, in their research, in his research, comes from the minority in Asia. So the two join together. Very interesting work. And the other one is Yoshichiro Tamura's work, Milky Bay. It's also very multi-layer and complicated background artwork, citing Mishima's life and his work. And in a way, why Mishima goes to a body building, and that's mark his very personal style as a person, as his appearance, is the influence of America after the war. This work talk about cite the journal, largely the journal page of his trainer, training trainer, coach, journal, and to form a kind of a no-person theater. And that one is Timu Cheng. Timu is a very special person by himself because he's born in Germany, but by Mongolian and Chinese ascendant. His father is German, but his mother is his father is Mongolian Chinese, but his mother is German, and his mother later married a second marriage with American, a native. So he has very special personal background himself, and his work is very, I would say, here. His work creates a utopian movement, a peace movement, but in utilizing north, east, south, west points as the cardinal reference in his work, and very modern 3D printing techniques. So you can see his own multicultural, we can say that, multicultural background influenced a lot his own work, but he try to transcend the cultural dimension, go to a kind of universal references. So my conclusion will be a kind of a hypothesis. I think we should talk about, when we talk about the curatorial dimension, we should talk about the prominent artists, because the two curators has both artists, being artist, and we named appointed curator, but also curator as an artist. That is today's very important problematics. But also behind these tendencies, we should talk about why there's these new tendencies, if that is related to the experience of critical relationship between artist and institution, and the alternative space, the dead end in the artist activism. So the trend that goes to largely to the curating work, and the culture of the project, and new relationship with the market. So a new figure of artist is not as avant-garde, like in the synchronic constellation, but it's someone sensible to the environment and propose its own readjustment, readjustment. So I think I will stop here because later I will go to detailed discussion with the figure of the curators in these two exhibitions. Just show their image to finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very exciting introduction and the comments of the exhibitions in Taiwan. We actually have reached the time, but maybe we can allow maybe two questions, a few minutes, 3 minutes. Yes.
A very brief question. You said that this painting C, 1929, is the first surrealist painting. I understand it's not globally, so it's first surrealist painting in Japan, or it's somehow related to Taiwan?
No, there's no relationship with Taiwan. It's just it's considered as the first serious surrealist painting in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But not the only one, of course.
Yeah, that's understood.
We have exhibited actually 3 important works both come from Japan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Maybe you want.
Nobody, I asked the second question. Yeah, I just wonder about. Okay, so it's very interesting to hear from somebody from inside of museum practices. You mentioned this multimedia aspect of contemporary museum, and I just wonder how do you feel about VR helmets, VR technology in the museum? I know Gugon use it, and for me it's a big question because it could be, of course, an adaptation to new technology, but it also has this feeling of rather not adaptation but capitulation.
That's what
I don't. Capitulation.
Surrender. surrender probably is a better word. Yeah.
I mean, we surrender to the technology, to the attraction brought by technology. Actually, that's a question, but it's a question out of this framework. But it's an important question in the museum world. Of course, all of us are very, museum workers are very attracted by the new technology, new possibility opened by the technology. But also, we need to be very careful about the results, because that could be, for example, in the discussion with the Cleveland, the most famous one is the Cleveland Museum, Gallery 1, of which people just come to experience the interaction with the works or installations developed from artworks. But they don't go back to the gallery to see the works themselves, the real work in a way. Yeah, so that's very attractive to the viewers, visitors, especially the young generation, because the young generation always the solid argument of this kind of development in the museum, because we want to attract young generation to the museum. We developed the 3D, 4D presentation, we did VR, we did all kinds of interactive, even gaming in Louvre, manga in Louvre, etc. And all the argument is to attract young people, because that is their cultural form. We have to go to them, not ask them to join us. We have to go to them with the form they are familiar, they accept firstly. But be very careful that museum is also quite different in a way with all other art medium. If we talk about art mediums, that we take care also with the university, because we can consider museum is a university with complexities. That's a very famous saying. But museum has this relations, ethic relationship with object it conserves. This is very core value of museum. So I personally think that we still have to be very careful about the usage of technology in the museum. In a way, they give more information, they give more pressure, but the risk is they take off our attention, our interest to the so-called original works. We have to balance these two very, very carefully.
Maybe as a final comment, I would maybe you could say a little bit about. I see these expositions as addressing kind of transnational problem or some kind of theoretical issues that is addressed through all these works from different countries. And I maybe you can say a little bit about how these kind of exhibitions would influence Taiwan, or how Taiwan, as a curator yourself, would see the development in a sense that the historical significance of this kind of curation. Yes.
As a curator myself, I was curator. I am no more. I'm now director, so I'm commissioner. I hire, in a way, the curators. So we are in a different role. But as curator, as an ex-curator, how I view the shows, the exhibition I talk about, I think they are kind of milestone in Taiwan, especially the synchronic constellation. Even it is not easy, this kind of exhibition, not easy to go into the museum, because the curators use a lot of reproduction. You can see a lot of reproduction, and they don't give much information to the viewers. So they break, in a way, the habitude, not the rule, but the habitude established in the museum. But it's kind of also, we will say, a very inventive gesture, but not easy to be received. And as for the biennial, this is another story. The biennial it's a very strategic option by the commissioner here, because Xu Jiawei, Taiwanese curator, he's a person of 30s. He's under 40s, not even 40. He's a quite young curator, but very has already some experience. And He Zinian has never curated any show before, and I give this very important mission to him. It's very risky, but I think the result is very good, because they create very good partnership and very good relationship with They are both artist curator, good relation with artists, and they create a kind of a very profitable resource using. They use the resource they have in Singapore, so the Singapore Biennial is in partnership with us, and we will send Taiwanese artist work to Singapore, and Singapore will send their videos to Taiwan, and in 10 days we will have a very good discussion with them.
Thank you. With this very fine comments, thank you. And well, let's thank Professor Lee. Okay, and it's lunchtime now.